The house smelled of cinnamon, roasted chicken, and fresh bread. Warm scents that usually meant comfort, family, and celebration. But that year, they only made my stomach twist. I had learned long ago that in my family, holidays were less about love and more about quiet judgment dressed in festive clothes. I stood near the dining table, arranging the silverware, trying to be useful. Mom glanced at me with that familiar look, an exhausted mixture of irritation and disappointment. "You don't need to touch anything," she said sharply. "Just sit down before you break something." I lowered my eyes and stepped back. My relatives arrived one by one, smiling at each other, hugging tightly, yet offering me only brief nods. I wished just once someone would look at me the way they looked at my cousins, with pride, with fondness. But I knew better. Lunch began with the usual fake sweetness, clinking forks, forced laughter, staged family warmth. Then the comments started quietly at first, so still living at home, no job yet, don't you think it's time to grow up? I tried to swallow the burning in my throat, along with the dry piece of chicken on my plate. I didn't look up. I had learned that looking up only encouraged more questions. Then, like a storm snapping at the edge of calm water, Mom slammed her fork down. "That's it, I can't take this anymore." The room froze, even the ticking clock seemed to pause. She pointed at me, her voice rising with every word. "I'm tired of you relying on us. Tired of you sitting around doing nothing. You need to leave today. Get out of the house and stop depending on the family." My breath caught. For a moment I hoped, prayed this was another one of her dramatic lectures, but the coldness in her eyes told me otherwise. No one said a word, not Dad, not my aunts, not my cousins. They stared at their plates, at their phones, anywhere but at me. The silence was worse than the words. It meant agreement. It meant I had never mattered as much as I hoped. I stood slowly. My legs felt weak, but my voice stayed steady. "Okay." I walked to my room, each step echoing the finality of her command. I packed my few belongings into a single suitcase. No one came to the hallway. No one checked on me. No one stopped me. When I stepped outside, the cold air stung my skin, but it felt cleaner than the house I had just left. I closed the gate behind me quietly, and with that soft click, a part of my life ended. Another part began, trembling but determined. The bus station was almost empty when I arrived, dragging my suitcase across the cracked pavement. A thin mist hung in the air, wrapping around me like a cold reminder that I had nowhere to go. The bright holiday lights decorating the streets felt cruel, almost mocking. Everyone else was going home. I was leaving mine. I bought the cheapest ticket available, no destination in mind, no plan, just distance. Distance from the voices that had crushed me, from the house that had rejected me, from the mother who had chosen humiliation over love. When the bus arrived, I climbed aboard and sank into a back seat. The heater rattled weakly, barely warming the freezing air. Outside, the world blurred as the bus groaned into motion. My reflection stared back at me from the dark window-tired eyes, red from holding in tears too long. I exhaled shakily and the glass clouded over. As the miles rolled on, memories surfaced one by one, uninvited and painful. The late nights I stayed awake, helping Mom with her paperwork. The mornings I skipped breakfast so the younger cousins could eat first. The countless times I put my dreams aside to be there for everyone else. I had never asked for much, just a little patience, a little belief, a little love. But even those had been too much for them to give. A sharp ache tightened in my chest, the kind that made you wonder if heartbreak could physically be felt. I let my head rest against the cold window, the hum of the engine vibrating through me. For the first time since leaving the house, tears slipped free. Quiet tears, the kind no one would ever see. At the next town, I got off the bus and walked until I found a cheap, dim hostel with flickering lights and peeling wallpaper. The receptionist barely glanced at me as he handed over the key. My room was small, just a bed, a lamp, and a window that didn't close all the way. But it was mine, and it didn't look at me with disappointment. That night, wrapped in a thin blanket, I stared at the ceiling. The silence pressed against my ears, but unlike home, it didn't suffocate me. Somewhere inside the pain, a spark formed. A promise, not out of anger or vengeance, but survival. I will build myself. I will become someone. One day, they will realize what they lost. My voice was barely a whisper, but in the quiet room, it sounded like a vow. Outside, the night was cold. Inside, something warm finally began to grow. The days that followed were a blur of exhaustion and survival. I woke before sunrise to wash dishes at the cafe near the hostel. My hands were constantly numb from cold water and harsh soap. But every shift meant a little more money. Another night I could afford to stay. After work, I took long walks through unfamiliar streets, letting the world distract me from the ache in my chest. One evening, after a particularly long shift, I sat at an empty corner table, sketching in my old notebook. Drawing had always been my escape, a quiet place where I could breathe. I didn't even notice the cafe owner's brother, Ray, standing behind me until he spoke. "You drew that?" he asked, pointing at the page. Embarrassed, I closed the notebook halfway. "It's nothing, just something I do." Ray shook his head. "It's good, really good. Have you ever thought about doing it professionally?" I scoffed. "Who would pay for anything I make?" He sat down across from me. "You'd be surprised. There are people online who make a living from art. Freelancing, commissions, digital designs. You've got something here." His words stuck with me long after he left. No one had ever looked at my drawings like they meant something. No one had ever told me I could be good at anything. That night, I found an old second-hand laptop the hostel kept for guests and searched everything I could about freelancing art forums, tutorial videos, beginner tips. The screen flickered constantly, but it didn't matter. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of direction. The next few weeks were brutal but transformative. I cleaned tables in the morning, practiced drawing in the afternoon, and studied digital design late into the night. I slept less, but I dreamed more. Slowly, things began to shift. I landed my first commission, an avatar drawing for a stranger across the world. It paid barely enough for a meal, but when I received the message, "I love it," something inside me lit up. Then came another order, and another. Soon, I was juggling cafe shifts and art deadlines, barely keeping up but loving every second. "Ray noticed, told you," he said with a grin. "You've got talent, just needed someone to say it. Success didn't come overnight." It came in small steps, long nights, tired eyes, trembling hands. But with each new client, each new design, my confidence grew. My past still haunted me, but it no longer controlled me. In the shadows where my family left me, I found something they never expected, a version of myself strong enough to rise without them. A full year passed before I stepped into a life I could finally call my own. My tiny apartment had become a quiet sanctuary, filled with my artwork, warm lights, and the sense of accomplishment I had built with my own hands. My commissions grew from single sketches to full projects for businesses, creators, and even small companies. What once paid for a meal now paid for a month's rent, and word, as it always does, spread back home. A cousin followed me on social media. An aunt commented, "Mashallah, proud of you," as if she had ever spoken that way before. Even my mother watched silently from the shadows of a private account. Then one evening, an invitation arrived. A family gathering, the same house, the same table, the same people who watched me walk out with a suitcase and no goodbye. At first, I wanted to ignore it, but something in me whispered not revenge, not anger, closure, so I went. When I entered the house, everyone stared as if a celebrity had walked through the door. My aunts smiled too widely. My cousins rushed forward, suddenly eager to hug me. Even my uncle, who once called me a burden, shook my hand proudly. I could feel the shift, their guilt mixing with curiosity, their regret mixing with need. They wanted to be close to me now that I was no longer the weak one. Mom approached last. She looked thinner, older, carrying the kind of quiet that comes from long nights of thinking too much. "You looks good," she said, her voice unsure. "Thank you." I replied calmly. During lunch, they surrounded me with questions. "How did you start? Are you really earning that much? You should teach your cousins." Their sudden admiration felt strange, almost surreal. The same people who saw no value in me were now desperate to claim some connection to my success. Finally, Mom cleared her throat. "You know," she said hesitantly, "we always believed you could be something. We just wanted you to learn responsibility." I set down my fork quietly. "No," I said, meeting her eyes. "You wanted me gone, and it worked. I learned responsibility not because of this family, but because I had to survive without it." Silence settled around the table like dust. They didn't argue. They couldn't. I stood, smoothing my jacket. "I'm not angry," I said softly. "In fact, thank you. Being pushed out was the best thing that ever happened to me." And with that, I walked away, not in pain, not in bitterness, but with the calm strength of someone who no longer needed the people who once needed him to fail. My revenge was simple. I became everything they said I never could.